Well, thank you very much. I must say that, just like the other speakers have said, I consider myself very, very privileged to be here with you. I will be speaking for just about 20 minutes, which I think is very adequate to deal with the issues at hand. Scientists have said that people's attention span is about 15 minutes. So by the time I'm speaking for 20 minutes, I'm actually exceeding the time allocated to attention span. But I hope within this little period, we'll be able to exchange some useful ideas and agree on the way forward as far as the issue that we're discussing is concerned. The introductions are interesting, and just to mimic what you have said, I want to say, I want to reaffirm, I want to confirm that there is future for Nigeria, seeing young men like you being highly interested in what you are doing. Well, I have spoken, and I think copies of my presentation will be available to you. This will be about the third vocation, when I will be speaking on the question of rebuilding NANS and the students' movement in Nigeria. Late last year, I was invited to a lecture at the Polytechnic in Lagos to speak on the role of Nigerian students in the continuity of democracy. When we lost Comrade a few months ago, the Nigerian Labour Congress, the Students' Union of the University of Lagos, and the Committee of Friends organized 2 commemorative activities to which I was invited to speak. Isiazu, as you have been told, was NANS president in 1985-86. I was one of my successors. Between us was Ubani, and of course I was the 3rd NANS president, and we had 2 presidents before us. Again, on that occasion, I spoke on the question of rebuilding the students' movement. I feel that this occasion affords a very perfect opportunity for us to revisit this issue. And what I'm speaking about is a continuing quest to rebuild NANS and the students' movement. I'm fully conscious, of course, that no matter what we say today, the debate cannot be exhausted, and it shall continue thereafter. So it is my hope that there will be some positive aftermath of this our gathering, and that this retreat would manifest in what I call ideologically and politically strengthening students' unions, and a new NANS. A NANS that genuinely fights for the interests of students, a NANS that fights for the interests of workers, a NANS that fights for the interests of professionals in the higher institutions of learning, a NANS that is concerned about the rebuilding of the education sector, and a NANS that fights for the interests of the working masses in the larger Nigerian society. That is what I hope this retreat will bring about. Now, people have spoken about what is called the golden era of NANS. And when you look at the background of this retreat, part of the concern is the fact that people feel that the NANS of today, the students' movement of today, seem to be far away from the ideals that we stood for. And in that sense, people talk about what you might consider the golden era of NANS. But my attitude has always been that the whole question of NANS in the past and in the current period should not be posed in terms of, oh, these other people were angels and this set of people were devils. Because at the end of the day, there are objective and subjective conditions that define the state of the students' movement at every moment in time. Again, there are always objective and subjective factors. And when we look at this, we need to see that it's not as if everything has completely gone wrong, but maybe there are challenges in 1 or 2 areas. And that is why, for example, despite the so-called generation, across the generations, from our generation to the present, you still see student activists, student unions that remain committed to the ideals of the students' unionism. And I have seen this in my discussions with a few of you who are concerned about making students more relevant. We have seen the emergence of radical and revolutionary student organizations. Leaflets have been circulated at Education Rights Campaign. These are eloquent testimonies to the fact that not every Nigerian student activist or student union leader has gone astray, and that people still continue, to fight. In terms of a brief historical recall, let me also say that we came at a time when we could talk about the fact that there was a general, radicalization of the larger society, and we benefited enormously, from this. That is why I talk about the subjective and objective conditions. Our NANS came at a time when the struggle was quite popular, and the fact that we also had a labor movement that shared the same ideas with NANS, and were able to move in the same direction. Suffice to say that it was also the struggles of Nigerian students that led to NANS. Before NANS, we had the West African Students Union that fought the post-colonial period, and shortly after independence, NANS, National Union of Nigerian Students, came into existence. In 1978, when NANS under the leadership of Sheikh Okewo fought against the increase in tuition fees in universities, that organization was banned. Not only that the organization was banned, many students were killed, and so on and so forth. It was in 1979, after the return of democracy under the Sheikh Shagari leadership, that a group of activists across the campuses, socialists, pan-Africanists, nationalists, came together and said that we need a new national platform of students. I'm happy to say that one of the prominent players of that period, and those who are the real custodians of the history of NANS, is there with us, the president of Comrade Owela Efa, who I call Owela Labour. Please give me that labor. These were the organizations that operated on the platform of the patriotic youth movement of Nigeria, and they had branches. At Ife, where I was a student, that is the University of Ife, I was a member of the Alliance of Progressive Students, one of the organizations that made up the platform called PYN. So essentially, it was PYN that was the brain behind the emergence, of NANS. Well, this is an experience sharing, and I would like to briefly talk about the NANS of our time, having talked about the emergence. But let me also say that I thought that we would have also applauded the fact that the NANS Charter of Demands, which we are hoping we will be able to review, was ratified at this BUK, and we are gathered in the same university to reassess the state of students' movement and possibly have a new way forward. I think BUK, the lecturers, the student union, and all the students deserve a special round of applause for playing this role. Well, you have been told that I was NANS president from December 1983 to April 1985. This was not because I was a sit-tight leader or that I saw the second or third term. It was due to a number of reasons. And I will explain how this is emerged in the next 5 minutes. We were elected on December 20, 1983. Now, in those days, the federal government used to present the budget at the end of the year, so that by January 1, the budget will go to the parliament, they will discuss it, and then it will be implemented. One of the things we used to do at the level of the student union and at the level of NANS in those days was that we would take a copy of the federal budget, we would review the budget, and come up with a position of Nigerian students on the budget. In those days, the demand was that not less than 10% of the budget should be allocated to education. Later on, when the United Nations took up the issue, it became a demand for 26% allocation to education in the budget. So we are taking the Shagari government's budget and analyzing it. And we are on our way to Lagos and the NUJ president to address a press conference on the Shagari budget. When we learned that the coup had taken place earlier in the day, that was the Ubani India coup. Now that was a very popular coup because the Shagari regime had actually led to corruption was widespread, and there was mass jubilation on the streets that we had the new government. Students were part of that jubilation. So our first task as NANS leaders was to issue a statement of conditional support and opposition to the new regime, in which we said we would support that new regime if it introduced free education at all levels and end the attacks on the rights of students across the campuses. Well, the response that we had from that government was the fact that free education was not possible at all levels, and that it would cost 4 billion naira. And I hope you will learn from this example. So we're confronted with the task of how do we prove that the government can afford 4 billion naira to fund free education at all levels in 1984. With the support of comrades who have even led campuses, who are part of UNN, what we decided to do was to do research. We went to the libraries and said, how do we prove that we can get 4 billion naira? And then we did some calculations, we went to the newspapers, and we said that, look, this government has just displaced the civilian government. By displacing that civilian government, some amount of money was being automatically saved from what would have gone into salaries of legislators, the governors, and so on and so forth. And we said that would give us up to about 1.something billion naira. But something that happened before then, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria had issued a statement that the Shagari government issued import licenses worth 11 billion naira, and that whereas in actual reality, only 2 billion of goods were imported into Nigeria, which meant that 9 billion naira had been stolen. So we said that by the time you even had that, Nigeria had more than enough to fund free education at all levels. When it never happened, and of course much later, when the government said institution fees will go up in universities, we mobilized and said we need to embark on a boycott of classes to ensure that this did not happen. The meeting where we were to take that decision to embark on that boycott of classes was originally seated from the University of Ilorin, where Mike Shola Oloriyomi was the student union president. The university was shut down to prevent NANS from meeting, and we quickly relocated to the University of Ife, where we declared a boycott of classes. And I want to say that one of the prime mobilizers for the success of that boycott is the late Chima Ubani, whom we are honoring today. In fact, Chima was working in class conference. You know, we had mobilization committees for the boycott across the country in different zones. The Eastern Zone mobilization was being led by the first president of NANS, Mr. Chris Mama. And then at the state, the vice chancellor of the University of Nsukka at that time, I think it was Professor Ekuku or so, invited the student leaders and said, what exactly is the demand of NANS? What exactly are you fighting for? And Chima Ubani was the first to speak, and he said, Mr. Vice Chancellor, the directive of NANS is that we should make this campus ungovernable for you. And that is all. So in his lifetime, we used to joke that Chima Ubani was an expert in making situations ungovernable. It was not accidental that when he became the secretary of the campaign for the democracy, he made that ungovernable for the government that had not the June 12 elections. Well, we call that boycott off after 11 days because the government then said they were no longer to increase tuition fees. And the Nigerian Labour Congress also had a meeting with us. NSC that time was led by Comrade Samson. And again, that time we had a working alliance, a political alliance with the Nigerian Labour Congress. But we didn't come out of it unscathed. NANS was proscribed. But the point that we made when the government announced the proscription of NANS was that NANS did not derive its existence from the benevolence of previous governments. That NANS derived its legitimacy from the mass of the students, and that if the students still believe in us, will remain. So that's why the proscription will continue to operate. Application fees were being paid, but when we tried to hold a meeting at ABU in August 1984, it was forcefully dispersed, and it wasn't until April 1983 that the University of Lagos Students Union under the leadership of E. Akisiju was able to host what we would consider an underground meeting of NANS where a new leadership was elected. The full story of that period is still told, but it should be explained that the methods of our struggle and the orientation towards the working class and its allies by our leadership derived from our socialist ideological background, whose philosophical thrust was constant linkage of campus struggles with that of Nigerian society, with a view to having the social change from the system, followed us. Based on this political philosophy, we believe that attacks on the democratic rights of the people, must be resisted by the students. We must make some progress. That much I would say about the history, of our period in terms of the struggles, that we wage. But let me also add that the objective conditions favor us. Campuses then, the bill was just 50 kobo, not 50 naira, just 50 kobo. So with 1 naira then, you will have food meal for a day. So that was why when the Ilorin was shut down, we were able to mobilize all the students to be fed, and all the delegates were freely fed by students who were donating their abilities. But let me also say something about struggle. Struggles always go up when you have boom in the economy and government is able to grant some concessions. But once there is a downward swing in the economy, governments always try to impose that on the working people. They increase school fees, they reduce worker salaries or retrench workers. So at every point in time, we must understand that our struggles must be linked with an understanding with the nature of the capitalist society. I would say in summary that this was the context in which our struggle took place. Now there has been changing dynamics. In the sense that things were no longer as they used to be. Even the trade union movement we have is not doing what we think they should be doing. And the recent fractionalization of the NSC was a matter of concern to us, and I'm happy that is being overcome. Because labor needs to do what it's supposed to do, fight for the interests of workers, but at the same time, play a leadership role in ensuring that the student movement leads us with responsibility. The student unions of today have been considerably weakened, and we all need to understand this. And it happened during the Babangida regime, when the Emmanuel Abisoye panel and the Mustafa Kofi panel was set up. And those panels recommended that students' union should be voluntary, which meant that unlike in our period, when from day one we knew how much the union was worth, as if then the population of the students was 10,000. So at the rate of 1,000 naira, the union had 10,000 naira in its pocket, and we used to base our budget on that. So they create objective conditions that led to the corruption of student leaders, because if we are not getting money from the students, we will get money from somewhere else. I hope we'll be able to address and advance this situation. Now, going forward, and this is very, very important, because what we are trying to do is to link the past with the present. I would say that going forward, definitely, I associate myself with calls for the review and update of the NANS letter of the NANS, especially as proposed, like I said before, by the Education Rights Campaign and this retreat.
New demands,
because in the past period we have had the privatization of what we call the commanding heights of our economy, the energy sector, the oil sector. These are common words that should be done collectively to the people. And I believe that students need to fight against that, because if these resources are available, when privatization is done, the resources are taken to private pockets. But when they remain in the hands of the state, we are able to call for accountability and proper funding of education. One of the reasons why governments have been finding it difficult to meet the demands of ASU is the fact that our resources are being taken to private hands. I hope the new charter of demands will address this, because I think it's important. But in addition to all this, I believe that the present generation of students, rank and file activists and leaders can borrow from some of our attributes, characteristics, approaches, strategies, and tactics, which enable our generation to live up the spirit of the students' knowledge. This includes, but are not limited to, I'm rounding up now. First, political, intellectual, and ideological self-development. We were not a student leader in those days if we did not seek and obtain knowledge beyond the classroom by reading and studying diverse literature that equipped you with the capacity to understand the dynamics of society, challenge dogmas, and offer convincing arguments geared towards social change and revolutionary transformation of society. One of the groups organizing this is called the Habitat Africa Center. In those days, we read what Rodney's Europe that developed Africa, the stories of Habitat Africa, so many socialist literatures, write-ups by African authors, text controlled by Ubani, and so on and so forth. That enabled us, anytime we are confronted by the government, to exchange arguments. They respected us. I remember the first occasion that I went to have a meeting with the editorial board of the Guardian newspaper. By the way, I was just 21 years old when I was NANS president. And by the time I presented various facts and figures, they were convinced that we had a case and wrote editorial. You need to be intellectually equipped and student leaders to be able to do this. The other thing we used to do, which I would recommend that you do, is the constant organization of symposiums, lectures, and other forms of gatherings of topical, local, national, and international issues that will promote the robust political, intellectual, and academic debates. So everything that is happening in the country, you as students, and as NANS, must organize discussions on that. Our lecturers are one of the most popular faces at our programs used to be Dr. Biko Fashino, who we used to call Jingo. And that was what was always happening. And it wasn't just students alone. We organized lecture, we invite state governments. When I was at IFE, the students union invited Abubakar Eli, who used to be the governor of Kano State. The students union invited, I think Dakode was governor of Lagos. We invite them to lecture so that students can directly interact with them and raise questions. I recommend this tradition to you. I also recommend democratic accountability and mass participation approach to the running of the unions. We must call congresses regularly, which we will be, operate a committee system that allows for the participation of rank and file, and prepare and present annual budgets to young students council. I have been the SRC before and later NANS president. I also recommend the constant expression of solidarity and engagement in united action with campus workers and professional unions and associations. Yes, 1 minute more. Especially ASU. We don't see that happening these days. When ASU says, give us this money, we distance ourselves. Sometimes when ASU is on strike, we even mobilize against ASU. This should not happen. There should be joint statements and joint political actions. In 1981, when 7 students of the University of Ife were massacred by the police during the funeral procession, the Students' Union and the Academic Staff Union of Universities constituted an administrative panel of inquiry, which was headed by the late Chief Ifaweli, which mentioned and with the other member as Mr. Lanre Arogundade. That panel of inquiry investigated the circumstances that led to that. As a participant in that protest, I was witness number 78. In the document that was later released. That is the power of solidarity between the students' unions and the ASU, and I think we need to return to that tradition. I also recommend that we should, as students' union and NANS, commemorate national, regional, and international days and anniversaries relevant to the struggles of students and change the larger society, such as various Students' Matters Day. Those days we will commemorate the Akitubi Ojo Day, the Animals Go Day. Every day that students have been killed, we do a commemorative activity. Sometimes it's a candidate procession, sometimes it's a lecture, sometimes it's a debate. These are things that enable you to enlighten yourself and move society forward. We used to commemorate the Giba Valley Massacre Day. That was the massacre of workers at the Enugu coal mine in Giba Valley in Enugu in 1949. It happened in November 1949, and every November we used to commemorate that day. You see, when you commemorate all these days, we also used to commemorate the Bakolori Massacre Day. That was when workers who resisted the destruction of their farms by the Bakolori company while trying to carry out the construction in Sokoto State were killed. So, in doing all this, we were seen as nationalists. We were not seen as ethnic communists because we remember workers who were killed in the East, we remember those in the North, and we were able to earn the respect and support of society. We used to also mark May Day, the Day of the African Child, Women's Day, March of every year, and so on and so forth. I've said earlier on that we need to subject government policies such as budget to interrogation so that we can come up with the position of students. Well, more importantly, you also need to protest any act of injustice against you, whether within the campus, using various democratic means. Let me stress that being a student activist and leader requires selfless commitment and sacrifice. Like I said, the full story of our period will be told. I have not mentioned the tensions, our various struggles, and so on and so forth. But I should say this, that in those days, we were members of the Socialist Council because we were running a kind of parliamentary system. So all the executives were members of the SRC. And we used to sit from 7 around 6 p.m. Sometimes we were there till the following morning. Let you know that all that we were entitled to as SRC members certificate was just a meat pie and a bottle of coke. There was nothing like sitting allowances. I thank you for your attention.